Hello, and welcome to the Freebirth with Jesus podcast by Awaken Birth. I am co-host Alison Collins.
And I am co-host Nadia Taylor. We are radical Christian mothers and birth keepers who are passionate about Jesus and free birth.
On the podcast, we will share testimonies of Christian mothers from all across the world who have free birthed with Jesus, and we'll talk all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. Welcome to the Freebirth with Jesus podcast. I'm Alison.
And I'm Nadia.
And today we have our guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Audrey Ross.
So maybe we can start with, whereabouts are you located?
I'm in Oregon, Central Oregon.
Perfect.
North of Bend area. If anybody knows Oregon. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's beautiful there.
So gorgeous.
And how many children have you had?
So this will be I'm pregnant right now. This will be my fourth baby. And I've had 5 pregnancies. I had 1 miscarriage.
Yeah. How far along are you now?
I'm about 21 weeks-ish.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there. So just past the maybe halfway, maybe not halfway mark. Yeah.
Yeah.
Depending on how long this goes.
I love that.
Yeah. Feeling good.
And
but I'm 40, so I feel like, people didn't expect me to be pregnant this time. Every other one they've expected. And this time when we announced it, people's reactions were a little bit funnier because they just didn't expect it. They figured we were done, and we're far from done. So they just don't know that. Yeah. I don't see any reason to stop. I love having babies.
I love that.
I love it.
Yeah. How did you meet the Lord or become a Christian?
Oh, what a beautiful question. Oh my goodness. So I grew up in a pastor's home. My dad was a pastor, and I remember, so I'm a twin as well. I have a twin brother. And I remember when my brother was about 3, I know, yay, twins. When my brother was about 3 years old, we were driving along, bouncing along in the car. We usually would go on these drives out in the country, and big old family. We had 7 kids. So there's 9 of us in this big Suburban. And he was talking to my dad in the front seat about Jesus. And he was making a decision that he wanted to live for Jesus. And I remember coming from the back, yelling in the back seat, I want to do that too. And my dad was like, you can't do that just to sit in the front seat. And I was like, oh, okay, well, all right. So then we talked afterwards, and my dad was like, this is a decision you make from your heart. It's not just you don't just make it flippantly. Yeah. It's a big decision. And so sometime when I was 4, we have this picture of me sitting in this chair attempting to read my Bible. And my mom had come by a few times and said, do you want me to help you, honey? What are you trying to read? I can't read at that point. And I kept saying, no, I'm figuring out how to be saved. And she was like, I can help you. And I was like, I don't want you to. Very independent even then. And finally I was like, okay, yeah, I think I need this. So I remember just sitting with my mom at the kitchen table and her explaining how Jesus had died for me, and I could choose to make him the Lord of my life. And that was my decision. And really, it's very precious to me because it was my decision then. It wasn't like, oh, hey, my siblings are doing this kind of thing, which in a big family, you can kind of get lost in that mix. Yeah. And then college was definitely a time of deciding for myself, do I believe in Jesus because I was raised in this home? Yeah. Or do I believe in Jesus because he's actually Lord of my life and I want to live for him in every way? And that was a process. I think it is for most people who've been raised in that very Christian home, which I was so blessed to be raised in. But that was a process of me actually deciding, no, he is Lord of my life. And this is what my relationship looks like with him. It's not via my parents. It's not via church. It's me and him together. And I really took ownership of that in college.
That's so good. I love listening to these parts of the stories.
It's so beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And it's encouraging because everyone meets God for the first time differently. And I think we kind of think, oh, well, we met Jesus this way. And that's kind of how everyone else experienced it. And so it's really nice to hear just how he's just everywhere. We know that, but just to really hear it, it's really cool. It's really encouraging.
So individual. He's so individual.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's not a cookie cutter type God. Yeah.
I used to write a lot of journals to God in my younger years. I did a lot of journaling and just did a lot of journaling to God. And I always felt like God, I really had a personal relationship with God, even as a young girl.
Yeah, beautiful.
Because I would write him these letters, and I have little journals from it. But yeah, he was my best friend, and I knew that even as a little girl.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So you mentioned this is your fourth baby.
Yes.
So have you free birth, other than the story that you're going to tell us of your last baby that you birthed, have you free birthed before? And can you tell us a little bit about those births?
My first baby was planned to go be working with midwives. I was working with midwives. At 36 weeks, we found out that she was breech. They dropped my care. I looked everywhere for a provider, couldn't find one. Actually, we were planning to drive to Portland because Portland was actually saying that they could do vaginal breech delivery. And we were in Boise at the time in Idaho. My water broke well before we were planning to go to Portland, and there wasn't any time for that. So my mom had 4 vaginal breech babies. My sisters had vaginal breech babies. Like, it's kind of a thing in our family.
Wow.
Yeah. So it wasn't weird to me at all. I was like totally confident in my body's ability to do it. So we went to the hospital. I declined literally everything, refused to wear their gown, refused absolutely everything, and signed an AMA and had her vaginally. They wanted me to push in the operating room, and there was 18 people in there garbed up, ready to cut me open if I wasn't able to get her out. She came out so fast, not a problem in the world. And the one thing they did is they shot me up with Pitocin without asking after she came out. Yeah. So that was the one. I mean, it literally, in so many ways, it was a beautiful birth. And then I really don't have a great remembrance of like the immediate postpartum because of that. That really actually launched me into motherhood feeling so confident because I knew I had defied the system. I had nurses coming in like in droves afterwards saying, we've never seen a vaginal breech birth, thanking me. Like, because there's 18 people in the room. Like, they're literally like, it was crazy. They're all in blue. Is a big, everybody's yelling push. It was quite the scene. And her emergence was beautiful. So then my next birth, I planned to have a home birth because that had been my original plan. And it was a precipitous labor, 2.5 hours. My midwives barely made it there. They were 15 minutes before he was born. And I really disliked every moment that they were there. The moment they were there, the Doppler was on my belly. I felt like they were very much up in my space, pulled my placenta out. I felt like things were rushed. In fact, the fact that the birth was so short, I think they felt like, oh, like we're going to be out of here soon. Like, she's already, here comes the baby already. And so it felt like everything was just kind of hurried. And it was a beautiful birth. It was incredibly intense because it was so fast. And then I remember thinking that they didn't do anything. And so I had been learning about birth so much during this whole period between my first birth and now, this was, I don't know, 4 years later at this point. And I just was like, I can do this for my next birth. I don't know why I would ask somebody else to come and do this. And my prenatals had felt like we really didn't do it. Like, basically everything they asked me to do, I was declining anyways. So like, why are we doing this? And they are very medical midwives. I've learned that since. And really, I was protected by God because had they been there sooner, they probably would have messed things up. So it was very just, providence of God that labor went so quickly. And they didn't get a chance to. So then there was a period of 4.5 years between that birth and my next birth. And I had a miscarriage. I kept having chemical pregnancies, probably dealing with some endometriosis. It was actually a real tough time for me. Like, I really wanted to be pregnant. About a year after my son was born, number 2, I was ready to be pregnant again. And that was a dark season of sorts of really crying out to God and saying, I'm ready for another baby. I'm ready for another baby. And in that season, God called us to foster care. So we started doing foster care for babies from the local Native American tribe. And so we had several babies in our care. And that was, to some degree, felt really good to my heart to be loving and caring for these babies. But it never filled that feeling of like, I know that God has more babies for us. And I did know that. God had told me that there were more babies. So, and God has spoken to me very clearly about all of my children, like in very specific ways. And so I was really crying out to God and pleading with him. And we were at this campground in the summer, and it'd just been the season of just like, oh, just pouring out my heart to God. And we went into this big, I don't know, kind of this public room where they play games. Nobody was in there. And they had this big bingo thing that you like turn and like bingo pieces come out. They play like bingo with a group of people. And so I just cranked it once, and the number in 31 popped out. And then I cranked it again, and there's like, mind you, probably 100 different like numbers in here. And in 31 popped out. And I was like, and immediately God said to me, you're going to have there will be new life in 31 days. And I was like, I felt like really shaky. Like it felt so like, oh my goodness. And we didn't have like cell service or anything. And so I couldn't check my calendar, because I've been tracking everything like fertility wise on my phone. Mm-hmm. And we finally got back to our camper where we had that. And I looked it up, and I was going to be fertile literally in 31 days. I told my husband, like, this is our baby. God has promised me this. I have a picture of in 31, me holding these two pieces. And I had just been studying Revelation in that season. And some other, I don't know if that's where it was, but God always confirms in 2 or 3 in the Bible. There's always 2 or 3 for confirmation. And so when I immediately saw 2, I was like, this is confirmation. And so my husband and I knew then we weren't going to have anybody that birth, but it's funny, like a few times I'd kind of like pull up a website and like look at midwives in the area. And every time I was like, ew, like, no, like can't, like, I couldn't even, like, even just pulling up their website, like, couldn't even read it. I just was like, I can't do that. And I remember being like, well, maybe a doula. And I was like, no, like, I can't do it. So, and my husband was fine with it. And at this point, I was definitely like moving toward actual birth work at this point, and had learned a lot that I need to know to be ready to free birth. Not that you need to know anything, your baby will come out anyways, but for my own mind and for my husband's mind to be like, okay, we feel confident in this. So that pregnancy was, I actually did have an ultrasound at a pregnancy resource center, which is like a Christian center. They have it here in the States for women to go, and you can get a free ultrasound. And that was really for my peace of mind, because I'd had so many chemical pregnancies and a miscarriage. And I really just needed to know that like there was a baby. And so I did that, and it was beautiful. They prayed with me, and they were so happy for me. They had actually been there when I had miscarried, the same ladies. And it was like a year to the day that I miscarried that I had my ultrasound. And they're like, we just pulled up your record. And when I'd been there before, they'd actually been the ones to tell me I'd miscarried. And so it was really beautiful that they were like, oh my goodness, we've prayed for you. And yeah, now you're pregnant. So yeah, that was beautiful. So it was the best pregnancy in so many ways, because it was the first one where I wasn't going to these kind of pointless prenatal appointments. Prenatal sessions can be beautiful. Like I love some of the prenatal I provide for women, but these were not it. Like these were just a bunch of things I didn't really care about. And so it felt so free. And outside of having heartburn, I had a wonderful pregnancy. My mom is a doula, and she had come to my first 2 births, and I asked her to come to the third. And she was actually the most worried that I was going to have a free birth, because she's been primarily a doula in the medical system. And so she has a lot of that thinking that has seeped in over the years. Yeah. And she's even free birthed her own baby. She free birthed my older sister. And I'm like, Mom. And she's like, oh, I know, Audrey, but it might not have been the wisest decision. And I'm like, you're all fine, right? Yeah. Like, you're all fine. And she's like, well, I just did it because we moved and I didn't like the doctor on call. And I'm like, well, it sounds like a good enough reason to me.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So it was kind of funny. And I was like, well, this is my 3rd baby, Mom, and I'm going to pre-birth as well. So she was the one who was kind of like, I don't know. And most people didn't know. So people would ask me, and I would just say I'm working with somebody local, which was me, myself, and I. Yeah. and they didn't say anything else. Yeah. Or I kind of shut it down, change the conversation. Let's not talk about this. I went into labor like 40 weeks, 4 days, I think was when I went into labor with him. And I remember feeling that morning. Well, that morning I really had a breakdown. This usually happens before I go into labor. I have a good solid breakdown. Yeah. I was so done. I went out and took a walk and I cried to God. It was like, God, I'm just done being pregnant. I want to be my baby. And I also just had this feeling like, falling on me today. Like, yeah, this feels like the right kind of breakdown to have a baby. I mean, because you just have to come to the end of yourself. You have to.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is okay. It's okay to come to the end of yourself. This is part of surrendering to the process of birth.
Yeah.
So I totally have. I was so done. And I also feel like before I have my babies, I feel like my belly feels like it's a part of my body. And then before labor, it almost feels like it's disconnected, where it's like this. I can't explain it other than I feel like my body shifts. And I'm like, this belly does not feel like it's connected to me anymore.
Yeah.
It's a weird sensation I've experienced in my other pregnancies too. And I was like, this feels, I feel like I'm gonna have a baby today. So I got showered and everything. And I remember feeling so maybe, I think I had a few little cramps, and we were headed to the chiropractor, and I told my husband, like, this could be something. I had a precipitous labor last time. I kind of was fully prepared to like have a baby on the side of the road, because 2.5 hours, I was like, this baby could come out in 45 minutes. In fact, I've had dreams of like having all my kids in the car, no husband, and like me going into labor and like figuring out how to like put the hatch back up on our Volkswagen and like have the baby in the back. Anyways, these were the dreams I was having. We got halfway to the chiropractor, and these sensations started to be pretty consistent. And so I started timing him, and I was like, oh my goodness, okay, we need to turn around. The chiropractor was like almost an hour away. Like, we're not going there. I was like, we're going home. And we got home and got lunch for the kids, and things kind of slowed down a little bit. And I was like, we're going to go. My husband and I went out and walked. And I just felt like I just want to be outside as long as I can, because I don't know how long I'm going to be inside after this. So we're just going to walk until I feel like I can't be outside anymore. So I'm sure we live in a little tiny town. I'm sure everybody saw us do like, the 10th loop where I'm like stopping to breathe through all the sensations. And they're like, what? Yeah, that looks like something's happening. But it was such a fun, special walk. I don't know. It's very, very memorable to me. And then I remember getting to the point where I was like, okay, I'm feeling a little vocal. And so let's go inside, because I don't actually want to be yelling outside. Walking is fine, but like, let's go inside. And got inside, and I had really visualized our bathroom being where I had my babies, and I had set it up that way. Just, in little ways. Like, I bought this rug that I really loved, and it was big, and it was going to protect the floor, and I could be on my hands and knees on it. And I had pictures of all my other birds in the bathroom already. So it was kind of like my little oasis, and it's kind of the furthest room away from all of the living room and all the happenings of the house with that many kids. We had four other children in the house at that time, maybe five. There was a good number of them, and just started moving through sensations, leaning on the counter, listening to music. And it was not, probably the entire labor was about 6.5-ish hours. And it really, most of that, sensations felt strong, but they were not feeling painful for quite a while. But they were strong, like definitely breathing through them, definitely was not talking, completely focused and in it. And then my husband, I was like, I feel like I need something to sit on. My legs are getting so tired. Can you get me a ball to sit on? And so he brought me a ball, and one sensation of like, I sat down after it, sat down on this ball, stepped back up, and my water just broke all over the floor, like the big, very dramatic, like pop and gush. And then the next contraction just like hit with a vengeance. And that was like the one that sent me yelling, because that just put everything, right into motion fast. And from that point out, it was like I hit transition really quickly, and it felt very difficult. So I'm not a water birth person. I really like to like hold on to solid surfaces when I'm in labor. And so I went from like standing next to the counter to then really until my legs pretty much buckled underneath me, and I was down on all fours and throwing up between contractions, which was really great. I was in the bathroom, so it was just like right into the toilet, and then on my hands and knees. working through things. And my kids were kind of coming and going. They had like the TV on, they had the iPad on, like 2 of them had phones, like every device in the world, which is never on, they were all on in our home. In fact, afterwards, my kids were like, man, Mom, I can't believe you let us watch so much TV while you were having your baby. And I was like, should I have another one just so you can do that? And they're like, yes, that would be amazing. So they're literally watching probably 2 shows at once. I have no idea. Grandma turned it all on, and that's just the way that was. So the whole time it was mainly only my husband with me, and then kids kind of running back and forth because my mom was out watching them. And I didn't want him to touch me, but he was so just supportive in the right way, like saying something that needed to be said, but not saying too much, and just beautifully encouraging. And I remember down on my knees, just, shaking, the sensations that just make your whole body shake, and then puking, and thinking to myself, like, I can't do this anymore. And knowing, okay, you can't say that yet. You're not allowed to say it yet. You have to get through another contraction. You're not allowed to say it yet. And then I get through that contraction, and I was like, you're not allowed to say it yet. You can't say it yet. You cannot say it yet. And because the moment you say I can't, it feels like far more of a reality to a woman. Like, words are so powerful. And so I don't know how long I did that, where I was like, you can't say it yet. You can't say it yet. You can't say it yet. And finally, I eventually like whimpered very much to my husband. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And he was like, you're doing it. Like, you're doing so beautifully. And my baby was almost there at that point. I knew that he kind of lifted up. I had a dress on, and he kind of lifted it up back of my rear end, and I knew he was wiping me, like, because I told him, like, your job is to wipe away the poop. Like, this is your job. Here's your wet wipes. This is your job. And so I knew he was, but I was also like, don't touch me. Don't touch me. In his mind, he's like, she told me to wipe away the poop.
Yeah. Hard.
Yeah. And I didn't even know he was actually, like, he's like, you actually didn't even know when I did do it. But you have this feeling of like, you don't want to be touched. So I'm quite sure he wiped away some of it. But I got to this point where in my mind, I was like, can't do this anymore. And I had started to shriek. Like, I'd started to really yell, and I knew I was getting into kind of a panicky feeling. And my mom behind me, she'd come in at this point, and the doula in her could not keep her mouth shut. Because I told her, like, you're not supposed to say anything. Like, you're with the kids, like, you're here, but you're with the kids. You're here for after the baby comes out to take care of me. And she was like, keep your voice low, keep your voice low. And I was so mad at her. And I was like, it took I couldn't even talk. So it took every ounce of energy to be like, shut up, Mom. Mm-hmm. And then she kept doing it. In my mind, I was like, the audacity of her to keep on. Where this is the thing with Freebirth, where, like, we want to call some of these things like they're going to upset the birth. But when you have people in your life, this is your family. This is like my normal dynamic with my mother. Like, this is not upsetting the birth process. Like, I'm very used to being like, that's enough, Mom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So as much as it was like annoying in that moment, it definitely wasn't upsetting anything. But I was also like, stop telling me what to do. But I also knew, I was like, but my brain also knew, like, she is right. I don't want to be shrieking this baby. I don't want to be panicking. I did not want to tear. I had wanted to very much breathe this baby out, especially after a really fast birth where he just came flying out. Like, I didn't want that. And I prayed to Jesus. That was like, I felt very connected to God throughout it, and especially with the music that was playing. But that was my moment. I really cried out to him. It was like, God, I cannot do this on my own. I need you to help me breathe this baby out. And it was incredible because I completely stopped yelling. I started breathing. In fact, my husband and my mom both thought that contractions had just completely stopped. Like, they were quite sure there was no contractions. And for, I don't know how many minutes this went on, but I was just breathing, no sounds now, after I had been very vocal. And all of a sudden I felt his head, just descend very quickly. And there was probably a little bit of push, but it was very involuntary for his head, for the whole thing. It was definitely fetal ejection reflex with him. But in like one whoosh, his head was out. And as he came out, I put my hand on his head because I could feel it. I could feel him like coming down. He stayed high. I had reached down a few times to try to just feel like, is he even close? And there was nothing. And even my mom watching from the back, she says, just her years of being a doula, she's like, I would have had no idea that baby was about to emerge. Usually I can see a woman's body opening, and you never opened, like, until his head was like coming down. And that is very much what I felt as well. He felt really high until all of a sudden he came down pretty fast. And so I supported his head as his head came out. And I remember just sitting there between contractions and my hand on his head, and I could feel one ear, and just like marveling of like, oh my goodness, that's my baby's ear. How's his ear? And I remember thinking, okay, now I'm waiting for him to rotate. This is what's supposed to happen. My baby's going to rotate, and like not feeling anything. There's no rotation. I'm like, okay, so do I push? And I remember trying to push. And it's like I had no pelvic floor and I couldn't push. It was the weirdest feeling that I couldn't push. There was nothing to push. It was the strangest sensation. And I was like, I'm just going to wait. So I have no idea how long it was. Probably not more than a couple minutes. But then the next contraction hit and I didn't push at all. And he just flew out. I scooped him up to my chest. In fact, he grabbed my shirt. His first thing was he grabbed my shirt or my dress. And I had to pry his little fingers off to like, I wanted to like lean down and make sure, like, are you okay? Like, do you have goop in your mouth? And like, are you breathing? Clearly he's breathing. He's got a hold of my shirt. But like, the mom, the mama in me, all your instincts are like, let me see you. Are you okay? Yeah. And he's totally okay. I was totally kind of in shock and shaking a little, I was so shaking still from all of it. And just held him, looked at him, then realized it was a little boy. I told all my kids and everybody, like, nobody gets to say who he is. I even if you see it, doesn't matter. This is my thing to discover first, which is very important, I think, for women. Like, this is your baby to discover. Everybody else can just bite their tongue for a moment. Yeah. So that was really amazing. And I could just feel my hands on his little bottom. I'm like, those are little testicles. Like, that's what a little boy feels like. So I didn't have to look. I already knew. And I didn't hear this in the moment because I was so caught up in him. But my daughter in the background is just bawling. So she was my photographer. She was 7 at the time. And I knew she needed a job to do for this. And because she kind of wanted to do everything. And I was like, okay, let's keep you busy. And so she had the phone and she was taking all the pictures. And so she's like, videoing this part of it. And she's just bawling and she's like, Mom, you're so amazing. You're so strong. You did it. You're amazing. And I have this video on my Instagram. And it's amazing. I didn't hear it, but I went back and watched the videos. And then I was like, oh my goodness, like, this is so precious. And she was just like, everybody who wants to say, birth is traumatic for children or things like that. Like, oh my goodness, it's the most powerful thing she's ever witnessed in her life.
Yeah.
She was just enthralled and she's crying these tears of like joy and just awe at what just happened. And all my kids are there, just looking and watching, and everybody's back, nobody's touching, but just witnessing this beautiful thing that's just taken place. And the challenging part was I had just the worst afterbirth pains that I've ever had. And they just kept hitting and hitting and hitting. And so I kept wanting to be like, just kind of soak in my baby. And another sensation would hit. And they were probably almost, at that point they felt like they were more difficult because I wasn't in the mental focus that I was in labor. And so I remember thinking, okay, maybe I just feel like the placenta needs to come out and like, maybe that will stop. And so kind of moved me up to the toilet so I could see if I could get the placenta would come out. It was not ready. So then I went and laid down in bed and still kept having these really, really powerful sensations in between, just trying to like soak in this baby. And he was starting to nurse. I was starting to, eat a little bit of food, and probably I didn't lay there very long. Probably like 15 minutes. And I was like, okay, this placenta has got to come out. Like whatever's happening here, like my body cannot keep handling these sensations. And so I got up and I squatted over a bowl and pretty much just one little push, one little pull, little traction on the cord. And it came right out. And I still had some sensations, but they were greatly diminished.
Yeah.
And there was probably what felt like the part that I was like the least prepared for was I had never witnessed my own bleeding with my own births, right? Because somebody else had been there. And even with my home birth, I didn't have Pitocin or anything after the birth, but the midwives, they were the ones like moving chuck pads and things like that. And so when I actually, like the placenta came out and then I laid there for a little while longer and then I'm like, okay, I need to get up and try to use the restroom. I remember being like, that's a lot of blood. And just that thought, that's a lot of blood, had a very kind of like draining sensation to me. Like, oh my goodness, like I was feeling fine, but then we say these fear, this is why words are so powerful. We say these words that are invoking a fear. And then I almost had the feeling that this now was too much blood, right? Like I could actually feel this like kind of draining sensation to my body where I hadn't felt that. So that's the power of the mind. So you have to really know, like, that's my mind. That's my mind. My body was just fine. But I had planned all along to put a piece of placenta in my mouth because I was so intrigued by this. I had learned that placenta is it can prevent hemorrhage, and even if you aren't hemorrhaging, it's not a hurtful thing to do, right? And I grew up hunting and I love butchering and I used to dissect animals and I was like, yeah, I'm putting placenta in my mouth. And so it might have been before that, it might have been after, I don't know. Whenever the placenta came out, I told my mom, like, go cut off a little piece and rinse it off. And so I had that in my mouth. And that was just like, it was kind of almost like my peace of mind. Also this thing I wanted to try so for anybody out there who hasn't done that, it tastes like raw meat, right? It tastes like blood, it tastes like iron at the inside of your mouth.
Yeah.
There's nothing gross about it. It has the consistency of raw meat. If you were to put a piece of raw steak in your mouth. And so I did that. And I also drank a smoothie that had a little bit of placenta blended in it. And I by no means had too much bleeding, but I had just never witnessed my own bleeding. And so it's more than a period, right? And so I was like, oh. And so I had also planned at that point to just use I wasn't going to use any chuck pads. I had all these like all natural things. And I was going to use like these reusable pads, like fabric pads. Yep. And I was like, okay, this is not containing the blood. So we like called this lady who is also Freebirth. She's older. Her kids are all grown. And we're like, can you please go to like the grocery store and pick me up like some diapers and some chuck pads because this is not containing my blood. And I just couldn't deal with it. Like there was just so much blood and I was like, I don't know what to do with this. So that was actually such a godsend. Like she was like there in 30 minutes with like all of that. And I was like, okay, thank you. Because they just absorb it differently. And so just to see less blood can feel just really nice. Your own mind. Because we just have this visceral reaction to blood, right? So that was just like very calming, like, oh, okay. Instead of like on it, like the pads weren't fully absorbing it, and then I'm like trying to rinse it off in the sink, and then it's just like it's just a lot of blood. And so anybody, take that tip if you want it. There's a time and a place to not be crunchy, and that was the time and place to be crunchy. Yeah,
I love that.
Good note.
Yeah. Just get the diapers and chuck pads, okay? Your baby will be fine.
Puppy pads here. They call them puppy pads here.
Oh yeah, puppy pads, exactly. That works too. Yeah, it just makes it a lot easier. And then I snuggled up with my baby. I think I had like eggs and toast. I'd eaten so many eggs in that pregnancy, and that's all I wanted. I was like, I only want eggs again. That's all that sounded good to me. And it was about bedtime, and I remember at that point, everybody was sleeping in a room. Like we had like family style sleeping. We have all these mats that like all the kids lay out and sleep on. And so like all the kids are all on their mats again. And I thought this is the most normal thing in the world. Only now baby's on the outside. Like everything is the same. Only baby's on the outside. And it was just the most beautiful feeling of like nothing really changed. I mean, it did, but it didn't. And just to go to sleep and cuddle up with your baby and like just so normal. And he was nursing right away fabulously. I knew the first time I went to the bathroom I had not torn because there was zero sting. In fact, this is amazing to me. I took a mirror down there because I was like, this cannot be real. I cannot believe that I don't feel anything. I had wiped and I was like, I feel zero pain. What is happening?
Yeah.
And it literally looked like I hadn't had a baby. Now that is not my after my first baby. I remember coming home and the nurse had said something like, "Don't go looking down there, honey," whatever, which is such a stupid thing to say. Look at yourself all you want. It's your own body, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely.
But she told me that. And so I remember looking and being like, "Oh my goodness, it's a cavern." And and it kind of feeling horrifying after my first baby. In fact, I drew a picture of it for my husband. I was like, "Oh my goodness, babe, like I do not look okay down there." And I was like, and he was like, "Well, let me look." And I was like, "No." And I was like, "I'm going to draw a picture." And so I drew him this picture and he was like, "Can't be that bad." And I was like, "It's that bad." And so I just remember this moment of being horrified after my first baby. And I had torn a little bit at my other pregnancies, with other births, but not much. And there was zero tearing. And I think the fact that he stayed up high, and then the fact that I breathed the baby out, which was really, that was the power of God that I was able to get control of kind of the panicky feelings that were going through my mind and my body. And just, you get to the end and the intensity and just, you kind of, and that builds, right? Like we hear our own screaming and it causes us to feel more panicky. It's a very cyclical thing. And so really getting that under control, I think, had a lot to do with that. And nobody was there to mess with my body. So I never knew when I was dilated at any point before, during, it didn't matter at all. So it was beautiful. Postpartum went really well. I had one moment about 5 days after he was born. It was a Sunday, and everybody wanted to go to church. I obviously wasn't going to go, but my mom wanted to go. I was like, "That's fine. Just leave my daughter with me, my 7-year-old, so she can be my helper." Well, she just wanted to watch TV. We were like watching these cooking shows. And so I'm such a go person. I just kind of was, and the baby was sleeping, and I was like, "Hey, you can hold the baby and I'm going to like get a few things done." So I was up and around way more than I should have been. It was my own fault. And so then everybody came home from church, and I had gone to the restroom and some very big clots came out. And so I had just to my mom been like, "Hey mom, like, do you just want to look at these?" And so she's, again, very medically minded, and she always has kind of has like this fear perspective. Like she just kind of looks at life through the lens of fear. She always has. I know that to be. I tell her she's a pessimist, and she's like, "No, I'm a realist." I'm like, "You're a pessimist." And so she was like, "Audrey, those are big." And that reaction right there, it really created fear inside of me.
Yeah.
And I started feeling really woozy, and I'm like, I got to get back down, go sit down on the couch. And I got like the sweats and the cold and like all these weird sensations going over my body. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm bleeding out. And even though I don't feel any blood coming out of my body, right? I'm like, I'm bleeding out. And I turned to my husband and I'm like, "Call 911. And so he did, because I told him to. And by the time they got there, I was fine, which is a short amount of time. I started praying immediately, because as soon as we did it, I was like, this isn't real. This is my mind. I already know they're coming. And so I started praying and I started singing. And so I was singing and praying and singing and praying, and like the whole family was there. Like, we're all singing and praying, and they show up and they're like, "How can we help you?" And I'm like, "Oh, I just had some heavy bleeding and kind of was afraid it was too much." And they're like, they literally brought people, EMTs that they were training in with them. So the guy who's questioning me, he is like being trained. So he's asking the most awkward questions you can like ask a person in the most awkward way. And so then they're like, take my blood pressure. And they're like, "Your blood pressure is normal, so you're not bleeding out. Like, if you're bleeding out, your blood pressure drops." Which, just for anybody doing a free birth, if you're actually hemorrhaging, your blood pressure will drop. So just if you need that like tidbit of advice for yourself, take it, get a blood pressure cuff. You're not bleeding out. It's just your anxiety that's like, woo, going crazy, which happens, and blood happens.
And also causes high blood pressure.
Yes, exactly. And it was elevated. I was really, actually, it's so funny. Like, it was like fear. And then immediately was like, "No, God, I know that I'm fine." And so I was kind of like coming out of that when they came in. Anyways, they talked to us for a while, and they're like, well, we don't think you need to transfer. Like, do you want to transfer? And I was like, no. And they're like, okay. So like I signed their paperwork, and there was a lady there. She was there, and I actually know her. So that was kind of weird. She's like, I'm like, oh, wow, you showed up. And she was like, do you want me to look at the bleeding? And I was like, sure. Like, why not? And so she was like, well, that looks normal to me. And I was like, yeah, I know. Like, it looks normal to me too. I know enough about birth at this point. Like, why am I even asking you? So they left. And I mean, they didn't know we free birthed or anything. They just were like, yeah, I had my baby 5 days ago. And they didn't need to know any other information. But that actually has been a powerful thing for me to see, because I've just realized again, and I've had this confirmed over and over in my life, like our mind, the words we hear, the words we speak, if we are not like being very vigilant over those, they can really control the actual sensations we feel in our body. Absolutely. And like I actually felt that way. I was actually shaky. I was actually all of these things. Well, I was totally fine, but this is what fear does. And so it becomes so important to really protect our space. And so I even do a lot of birth trauma debriefs now, where women will tell me like the fearful words that their midwife says.
Yeah.
Especially a lot of them around bleeding. And then these women feel some sort of way. And I'm like, well, of course you did. Like, what fearful words? Of course you felt like that. But how are you feeling before? And they're like, I was feeling fine.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, like let's just back it up then a little bit.
Yeah.
Because your mind's just been fine. Like let's take away this like the story of what happened and like peel back the layers, and like, yeah, fear can really create sensations in our body. And so it was a good
Lord doesn't give us the spirit of fear, but
right,
a sound mind.
Exactly. And when we are fearful, our sound mind goes.
It's gone. Yep.
Yeah. And mine was. And I was all of a sudden like, nope, I'm not going down that road.
No.
I have done that road before in my life. I'm not doing that. Like, God, you will give me the power to rein this back in. And he totally did. And I was totally fine. And I knew it was fine by the time they showed up. They had to, I mean, they did those things because they're like, well, now we're here. Like, do you want us to take your blood pressure? And I'm like, sure. Yeah, we can do this stuff. So you can also call 911 and they don't have to take you away. So like, that's your choice. You don't have to go with them.
Absolutely.
So yeah, and it was a beautiful postpartum, except for that little that little silly kind of hiccup, which has been such a great teaching thing actually that I've used, and I'm grateful for it in that way. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It was really, and like, and I love hearing the first birth and then leading into free birth, and how God's like helped and walked with women along that way. It's really encouraging, because there's lots of women who free birth because it's a generational thing, like their mothers and grandmothers did it and things like that. And that, although that's like so powerful to hear, because now we as women are doing that in front of our daughters, and they will be that woman one day. But it is really, it's really cool to also see how God's working in women who've never done it before, and God's leading them there. So I really appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, thank you for hearing it.
I have a few questions. So, well, actually, the first one's like a statement. Going back to your first birth, you were talking about, I feel like I have to state this. You were talking about the midwife gave you, so you had your beautiful breech birth, and then you've had your Pitocin, and they've done it without your consent. And I'm assuming without your knowledge, like they just did it.
I feel like she said, like, we're just going to do this.
As she kind of does it.
I have baby on me. Yeah, she didn't ask for my consent. But I vaguely remember this, like, her saying, like, we're just gonna something, But
and because I've experienced like in hospital births, and they're like, we're just gonna do this as they're doing it though. Like, it's not, are you okay for me to do this? Or we're just gonna do this. Are you okay for me to do this? Are you ready for me to do this? It's, I'm just gonna do this. Like,
exactly. No, that's no consent. There's no consent there.
Yeah.
No.
I don't know about the US, but I have heard a lot here in Australia. I can imagine it's very similar. is that the training around giving that Pitocin, and it is more so for viewers and listeners, is that midwives are trained to do it while the mother is having a contraction, so she doesn't feel it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Which is huge, because in your case, like you were saying, there wasn't an actual conversation, and obviously that's not informed consent, but that's so much. They're actually training medical professionals to do this, to not get consent, and then so much to the point that you don't even know that you've had it done to your body.
So horrible. Till you go back
and when we know what the risks are with the Pitocin, or in Australia we call it Syntocin, the jab, is that it does increase your risk of retained placenta. It does increase your risk of postpartum hemorrhage. So women are going away and having this experience, or instantly having this experience.
Yes.
And now they're like, well, what's wrong with you? Like, say you come back the next day and I've got heaps of bleeding, heavy bleeding. It's like, well, I need to know that, because that is my medical information. So then I can go to the doctor and say, I had this, and this is probably what's causing my bleeding. Yeah. Or you can go to the doctor and say, no, I freebirthed and I didn't have that. And they're going to be a little less worried about you hemorrhaging right there on the spot.
But they're also giving it to you so that you don't hemorrhage, right? So it's very twisted, so that they can manually like remove your placenta. So they have created both the problem and the solution, and it's
like the God complex, the savior complex. Totally. And with this birth, how long was the labor roughly?
6.5 hours.
Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't track it as much as I did in my others, but I'm guessing somewhere right in that range. Yeah.
Did you say 6.5 roughly?
Yeah, 6.5.
Okay, yeah, cool. Yeah, so and with your breech, you said that your second home birth was 2.5. How long was your breech?
First one was 12 hours, actually, to the money, because, and that was such an answer to prayer as well, because the doctor there had said, like, I'm giving you 12 hours from when your water broke to have this baby out. And I was like, okay, like, I will do this. And I mean, I was doing everything to progress that labor. I was doing squats. I was on my hands and knees, rocking, like whatever I could do. I mean, they put a monitor on me. I took it off and I literally left the grounds. Like, I left the building, and they couldn't do anything about it. Like, really.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I did whatever I wanted to. I brought tons of food to eat. I'm sure they were a little bit fed up with me, but I did whatever I wanted to, and it did progress. And I just fully trusted God with that.
Yeah.
Like, this is, it's going to come in that amount of time. So it did 12 hours. Yeah.
I love that. And I think it's just a reminder that they are a paid service.
Yes, they are.
So you are able and should be able to do whatever you want, because it's a paid service. Regardless of your being in America and having healthcare that you have to pay for, and here in Australia we have free healthcare, it's still a paid service, because I work, I pay taxes, my family pays taxes, and that's what's paying for that healthcare. So just a reminder for other people.
You can make it sound like you can't.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But
I just physically removed the monitor. They're like, here's a monitor you can walk around with. And I was like, thank you. And
I love that for you.
Yeah. And I left.
I love it. I love listening to dads in birth, and because birth is so intimate in and of itself, the woman alone, like, that is such an intimate thing for her to do with her body. And then to do that with Jesus, like your relationship with Jesus outside of birth or in birth, whatever, just your relationship with him is really intimate. And then you have like your husband and your children, your mom's in the other room. I just love like how, and like you said with your mom, like talking, it's not, that's your mom. That's what you do all the time. Like, that's your relationship.
Right.
You're having, it's just another moment of someone that you love and you trust, and you having a conversation with. Sure, it may have been annoying or whatever, but and actually the dynamic of it was like, she's your mom, like, and she's like telling you what to do, and like, she's mothering you in this moment that you are literally birthing your baby, becoming a new mother again. And it's like, I love the dynamics of how that can kind of unfold. Yeah. But with your husband, you said that you got to the point of saying, I can't do this. And more so, not for you, obviously, but for people listening, is just how powerful, and you've talked many times about how powerful language is. And so I wanted to pull up that point that you said, I can't do it. And he said, you are doing it. And what I hear a lot when I'm attending births, and I'm not sure about either of you, but what I do hear with other people around, and it's not a bad thing, it's not ill intent at all, but they say, you can do this. And I think there's a huge difference between saying you can do this and you are doing this.
Yeah.
And it's just the language change. Like, you know, either the woman is like still feeling encouraged and things like that. But for me personally, and what I've seen at births, when maybe hubby is saying, you can do this, and then I always say, you are doing this. He then kind of, sometimes I've seen them flip and say this. They're like, oh yeah, she is actually doing it. And he'll say it. And it's so much more encouraging, because like, it's not, oh, you can do this in a week, you can do this in a year, like you can do this one day. It's like, no, you are currently in the moment of doing. Yeah. So I just love that he said that.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Yeah, he said everything he said was wonderful. He was really He kept telling me, "You're so strong. You're so strong."
Yeah,
and like, really told me, and I'm not feeling that way. You know, no, you're so strong.
Yeah, and that's why, like, men, when like the dads, you go into like a conversation with them, or you hear them, like women talking about their partners, and sometimes their first response at the beginning, if they're the first time dad or they're new to Freebirth or whatever, they're like, oh, I don't have a place here, or I don't know what to do. And it's like, you know what? The thing that you're going to do is, you know her emotionally better than anyone else on this planet. No one should or can fill those shoes. So do that. So in the moment that she's saying, I cannot do this, the only person that she's actually really going to listen to is you. I can say it all I want as her birth keeper, her photographer, whatever. And I mean it. And she may go, yeah, she probably believes in me. Yes, because we have a relationship. But ultimately, me saying it versus her husband saying it, so much more impactful. So much more impactful. Yeah. And I loved that you had like all the kids, like, I loved how you had all the kids in the lounge room, and you talked about it being normal. Like, you were there, like you could have been the day before, you may have even been laying there pregnant, and baby was there in your belly, and everyone's around. And then the next day, baby's just still probably even similar position, but just not in your belly.
That was out. Yeah.
And I think, and you know, you were saying like women and people in the world are, like, you see on social media, like someone's free birth or their home birth, and they're like, and children around, they're like, oh, get the children away. Like, that's so traumatic for them. And honestly, how are girls meant to learn about birth if they don't see it?
Yeah.
And you know, they're not,
and men too, because those little boys are learning what it means for a woman to be a woman. And like, how are we teaching our little boys how God designed a woman? If they aren't seeing this, like when my little boys talk about, like, I have my 6-year-old, he loves to talk about who he's going to marry someday. He always wants to talk about it.
That's so beautiful.
she's gonna want to have babies at home, and like, I'm like, yeah, that's really important. Oh, he's got a list, he prays through them, like, God, if I marry this person, or if I marry this person. Anyways, it's very funny. But I feel like that is the education that fixes our broken relationship with sexuality. And so many things in our world. I'm like, if we just return birth to the home, we're now learning, like, this is what it looks like. Anyways, absolutely. I probably
no, but it's true, because like, and then also the boys, like, I've got 3 boys and 2 girls, like, so my 3 boys watch my husband and how he is, and so we're gonna have less men actually being like, well, what's my role here, because they're actually watching a man fill that role and do And then they're
That's
like, oh,
so good.
I know what to do. I just like, I fill
Yeah.
the bath pool, or I get towels, or I make sure she's comfortable. I help her walk somewhere. I
Yeah.
encourage her with my words. Like there's a ton of things that you can do as a partner.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, and the very last question that I had for you was you talked about the placenta. I have never put the placenta in my mouth. I have never like seen anyone do it. I've never attended a birth where a woman has chosen to do that. So just very briefly, you had mentioned that you asked your mom to go cut a piece and wash it off. And so
Yeah.
I get the cutting so you can fit it in your mouth, but the washing
Yeah.
off, was there a particular reason for
Um,
you why you washed it?
I just it was looked really bloody. It just was
Yeah.
my personal decision. I just was like, that looks like it's dripping with blood.
Yeah,
So I
fair.
didn't want to rub it. Just like, can you just rinse off like the
Yeah,
extra blood?
okay.
I could
Yeah.
have just patted it off probably, but
Yeah.
in mind I just was like, and it was probably, I'm thinking back to all the meat I have butchered in my life. Like we hunted wild game my entire growing up. Grew up in
Yeah.
Wyoming, and butchering, like you cut meat and then you always rinse it, right?
Yeah,
Before
okay.
you do anything with it. That's just
Yeah.
what you do with meat. And like, this looks
Okay.
like meat. And
Yeah.
so I don't know. It was a very like, rinse that off real fast.
Yeah.
I
I
know a
mean,
lot
it
of the
makes
benefits.
sense.
Yeah. So I don't know that you would necessarily have, I mean, you wouldn't have to. The whole benefit is the fact that, it's been flooded with oxytocin as your whole uterus has. And so you can do the same thing with a cord, or the membrane would have the same effect as a piece of placenta in your mouth in just helping your body contract the way it needed to slow your bleeding. So like if your placenta wasn't out, you could always just put a piece of the cord, just tuck on a piece of the cord.
Yeah.
Would be have the same impact.
Yeah. So the oxytocin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was awesome. Thank you. Because like I said, I never done it. So yeah. And I would happily do it if I felt like in your situation, if I felt like I needed to. But yeah, so it's just a curiosity question.
I mean, I had decided beforehand I was going to,
like
despite anything else. It just was like, I just wanted to. Like, this is one of the things I'm gonna do.
Try it out.
Yeah. So I did it. I don't know if I'll do it again, but I did it.
Love that.
I guess I don't even know if they are questions, but they're just more of like the highlights, I guess. That part where you said, even though before you went into labor, you had that breakdown that you needed, but then that part where you were holding off saying, I can't do it anymore. You asked and you prayed, you asked Jesus to just come and be with you.
Yeah.
Do you feel that that's what you needed to, surrender, to finish surrendering? Like it was like we hear it in some stories where women, the little control that we can have in labor, that we just hold on to.
Yeah.
And it was just like, no, I need all of it. What did you feel Jesus just putting his hand
on that? I think also it was like, I felt so close to Jesus while like at the beginning, I'm like singing and I'm worshiping and I'm like swaying through all of the sensations. And then it's kind of like I lost that focus as well, because the sensation started to become so powerful that my mind was now like not fixed on that any longer. And so it almost was like a returning to that as well, like both around. And I would totally agree with you, total surrender of like, I can't do this. This is yours, Jesus. You're gonna have to help me.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, that it was surrender, because I was like, I can't do this alone. Like I need you to help me. I can't do it anymore by myself. And I felt like he was totally there. In fact, that moment was probably the closest I've ever felt to Jesus in any of my births. Like it felt so tangible. Like he was just right there with me. And everything just shifted in that moment as well.
Yeah. Aww. That's one of my, but hearing the women we've heard so far on doing these recordings, like all have slightly different, similar points of how they felt God through their birth, whether it was during labor, birth, or more in the postpartum. Like there's generally seems to be, when women invite God into their free birth, especially because we don't have someone else intentionally to outsource our need to be saved. So
Yes.
to save us. So
Yeah.
we ask
Yes.
God, and it's just us.
Yeah.
Us. We know, sure, our body can physically probably do it, but it's probably down to more our mind that is holding us back.
Yeah.
And that's where God can really help fill those gaps. Yes, physically, obviously, like with your bleeding and stuff like that and all that afterwards. But like you said, with the mindset of just those words or thoughts that can creep in again, God can always step in, take those fears away, and bring peace. Always seems to repeat himself and those stories of bringing peace. Even if, sure, a woman actually is starting to feel not okay, there's peace and knowing I might need assistance versus fear that I might need assistance.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
fully agree with that, Nadia. And I think, isn't that the most powerful part, right? Is that, like, even if we're choosing free birth, the goal isn't free birth. The goal is actually Jesus.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we are choosing, we feel led to free birth, but we're doing it with Jesus because he's our protector and he's our guide. Holy Spirit will speak to us and alert us. And so, yeah, I fully agree with that, because, like, even times like when I've listened to women, you know, they've transferred, even like, you know, in my own experience, when I had this large blood clot, I remember sitting in the hospital and I'm 37 weeks pregnant, and the head of the emergency department had to come in because every doctor I'd spoken to about having this giant blood clot, I was like, okay, because God had given me that peace. And they came down and they're like, do you understand how horrible, like how like scary this is? Like, you could really die. And I'm like, I know.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid. It's okay, because God had given me that peace. And it's not to say that then the blood clot disappeared, because I still have it in my leg. But that's not the thing. It's not about the situation changing. It's about consistently and constantly staying in prayer and staying in relationship with Jesus and knowing that he's the one that gives us the peace. Yeah. I love that you brought that up, Nadia. Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We so appreciate all of your wisdom and sharing your story. And yeah. And before you go, can we pray?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for today. Thank you for just uniting us three. I love that we can all come together as sisters in Christ and get to talk about the design of birth that you have crafted, you have created, and you've knit this baby together in her womb. And Lord, I just thank you for that. I thank you for this new baby that is being knit together in her womb too, Lord. And I just pray that as we release this episode, when you say this time, Lord, that it will reach many that need to hear this and that you have called to hear this, Lord. So we do all things for you and honor you and to glorify you. So just thank you for giving us the opportunity to both listen and share in this time. So praise you, Lord. And yeah, we pray all these things in your son's precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the show. Tune in next week for another episode of Freebirth with Jesus. To share your story on the show, check out our website and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at awaken.birth. Don't forget you can watch this episode and more on YouTube.